Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. This is a webinar about the Homework Starts with Home preliminary practice model, in particular focused on the two-generation approach. Thanks, everybody, for taking time today to be with us. Next slide, please, Jane. My name is Eric Grumdahl. I am with the State Office to Prevent and End Homelessness and the Department of Education. And I will be, in a moment, handing this over to Jane Tigan from Minnesota Management and Budget, who will walk us through today's presentation. Just a few logistics to get out of the way for everybody participating here in the room as well as remotely. The session is being recorded. We're specifically recording slides and audio so that it could be posted later and shared publicly. And so just please be aware that the audio from today's session will be recorded. We intend to leave a lot of time at the end for your questions, and as you'll see in just a moment, also invite you to weigh in with your questions throughout the session. And let's see. Jane, actually, I'm realizing I'm going to have to enable that Menti slide in a second, so we'll get there in a moment. Please make sure that if you're here in the room before you leave, you get a parking voucher to cover your parking here at Minnesota Housing. If you're joining remotely, we've muted all other participants. If you're using the GoToMeeting feature, that means that your audio control is orange. Please keep yourself muted when you are not speaking, just so we don't pick up any background noise. In addition, please make sure not to put us on hold if you're joining over the phone, as that can send hold music out across the webinar. We will not be looking at the chat function today. So if you do have something that you need to weigh in, I would encourage you to just unmute yourself and share that comment. There is a handout that's available for folks that are here in the room, and it's also available online at the web address that's on your slide, on your screen right now. That's tinyurl/hswh-2-gen for Homework Starts with Home 2Gen. And that will be something that Jane refers to in a moment. Throughout the presentation today, we're going to be using a tool called menti.com that allows us to do kind of real-time capture of your questions. And so that tool will be enabled in just a moment so that you can weigh in with your questions. But already, either on your phone or on a separate tab in your web browser, whatever you want to do, you can go to menti.com and put in the code that's on your screen and be able to then pose questions throughout the session, which will then be visible at the end when we get to the last slide, so that everybody can see those questions, and then we can use that to guide our Q&A. So you don't have to hold on to those questions before we get to the very end. Jane, do you have a preference in terms of folks asking questions throughout your presentation or waiting until that question period at the end?
I'll probably look through the end.
Okay.
So I think versus monitoring the Menti as we go.
That's great. So with that, I'm really happy to introduce Jane Tigan. Jane is with a results management team at the Minnesota Management and Budget Agency, which is responsible for kind of a variety of enterprise-wide strategies. But I've really gotten to know Jane in the context of her work with Minnesota's 2Gen Policy Network, really looking at opportunities both within and across state government, but also in partnership with communities to identify strategies, really specific strategies to implement a 2Gen approach. And Jane's work and some of her colleagues that are doing that work are connected also with a lot of national efforts along those lines. So really delighted, Jane, to have you here with us and to have you walk us through the 2Gen approach. So with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Eric. And thanks for that great introduction. I'll highlight that on the slide right now is my email address. Please feel free to email me if you have questions as you sort of think about the work, or your potential work and the PowerPoint today that we're going to be going through. So I'm here to talk about one element of that preliminary practice model that has been highlighted in the Homework Starts with Home documents and RFP. And there are two things that, as I was going through it, really stood out to me in the description of the preliminary practice model. So this idea of common ingredients that give enough area to sort of honor local differences. And so What we're going to be talking about today is one of those common ingredients. That's 2-gen. But you'll see going forward that the 2-gen approach can really honor those local differences. There's not a prescriptive model with a very clear fidelity that needs to be headed to 2. This is really an approach to work and work in many different levels and places. There are certainly, when we talk about the 2-gen approach, you could imagine a 2-gen approach to selling cars, perhaps. But what we're talking about is the 2-gen approach to human services and specifically to ending poverty. And that's really important, especially as we think about our state, Minnesota. This idea of ending poverty through a 2-gen lens. We have 180,000 children who are living in poverty right now. And the current systems that we have to address that really aren't working for everyone. And they especially aren't working for low-income families of color. So this is true in our state where we face some of the largest racial disparities from the moment of birth with infant mortality and low birth weight to adulthood, with educational attainment, share of adults working, and home ownership, really the key to intergenerational wealth. Families of color are far overrepresented in our poverty figures. So white families, 1 in 20 white families are in poverty, and that jumps to 1 in 5 Hispanic families, 1 in 4 American Indian families, and 1 in 3 Black families. Figuring out how to end poverty and ensuring that all children and parents have an opportunity to thrive is an issue of equity, and we very much see the 2-gen approach as a way to think about equity in our services and systems. So what we're going to talk about today is what is 2-gen. I'm going to give a little bit of an example of 2-gen in housing specifically, given the topic interest here, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the Minnesota 2-gen Policy Network. So let's start with what is 2-gen. First we're going to think about the who of 2-gen. And I guess who here is a parent? You can raise your hand, and if you're sitting there by yourself, raise your hand if you're a parent. Or who here has ever been a child? So at this point, everybody's hand should be up, right? So I think when we talk about 2-gen at its most basic, these approaches really intentionally take into account something that we all already know, that there's a relationship between parents and children. They're interdependent, they're interrelated, they're inextricably linked. And so to end this cycle of poverty, we really need to take into account both generations. This matters when we look at the disruption of healthy brain development for a child in poverty, the reduction in school readiness for children, but it also matters because being in poverty impairs adults' cognitive and emotional functioning, and there's a negative effect on parenting practices. So we know that that relationship matters and exists, and yet many of our systems aren't set up with that reality. So taking a 2-gen approach is recognizing that relationship and accounting for it in the work that we do. When we have this, when we look at a 2-gen approach, as I said, it's a recognition that currently we're really siloed. So we have programs that are specifically child-focused, and we have programs that are specifically parent-focused, or rather, we should really say adult-focused, because sometimes we don't even know if an adult is a parent in the program that we're implementing or a policy that we have. The goal here is really to have policies and programs that are full family, that take into account both generations and take into account that interrelated relationship that we talked about. 2-gen programming has been around for decades, but really and the state of Minnesota has a very good grounding with 2-gen. So, we think about Head Start, CAP agencies, the Jeremiah program. These are all really great examples of 2-gen programming, and it's really right to permeate systems even further than what we've seen so far. I also want to point out that while we have to say parents and child, we recognize that it's not always the child's immediate parent who is their caregiver. So, it may be a grandparent or it's a a different adult who's the main caregiver. So we really mean caregiver and child or full family approach, but we say 2Gen just for that's what you'll hear most often. So when we talk about the what of 2Gen, just like we recognize that parents and children have a complex effect on one another, we also know that we as human beings have complex and interrelated parts of our lives. What I'm doing at work is affected by what's happening at home. And attending to just one part of a family's life, like a job or a house, is really similarly an isolated approach to that interrelated reality that we have. So I can look at just education, but it doesn't mean as much unless we have the other portions of a person's life represented and how we work with them. So 2Generation of programs and policies really have potential for strengthening family systems to weather these major hardships and provide greater security and support for learning. We want these gears, we look at these gears when we talk about 2Gen work, education, career pathways, economic assets, health and well-being, social capital. We want these gears to be touching and to be able to turn one another so that something good happening in social capital can help your health and well-being and your career. And we want these gears to be working together. But similarly, as we talked about with the continuum, oftentimes our policies and programs really only look at one of those gears. And you can't do much for the well-being of a family with just that one gear. So really a goal is to try and figure out ways to have policies that take and programs that take into account all of these gears. And when we talk about where, I don't mean geographically where, though I imagine that could be an important component too. But I really mean where do we see the opportunity for 2Gen approaches? It's not just for programming, but federal policy, state policy, manuals, rules and regulations, programming, and data and evaluation are all opportunities for us to apply a 2Gen frame. Now, there may be some of you here on the phone who are saying, I've been trying to do whole and full family work for decades, and the big white domes that you put up there really prevent me from being able to do whole and full family work. And I would say, yes, that's true, and there are very siloed programs that we have had decades of siloed work. And so what I want to say to that is that we're really trying through Homework Starts with Home, through the Minnesota 2Gen Network, to learn in partnership with community, counties, and others, school districts, to see where we can change and how we can have a bigger impact together than just a single one of us trying to do this work. So as a state, that's really one of our main goals, to understand where priority areas are for changing and adapting policies and practices within learning. I'll say too that, as we talk about this, it may seem like, okay, so now we're going to have a whole new program that we're going to call 2Gen and redo it the way we're doing everything. Well, maybe not. This is a slide from the Administration for Children and Families, the Health and Human Services webinar from September of 2016, where they pointed out, 2Gen is not a new way. 2Gen is a new way to do business. It's not really a new program. As we mentioned before, it doesn't need to be a specific model. It's not asking to put into all of these things into a single system. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it is really putting the onus of coordination and thoughtfulness about the way programs work together on the people who are implementing, setting policy, and doing the programming. It's also about inviting families into the system design process and linking high-quality services. So what might this look like in practice? As you can imagine, it really depends on the kind of work that you're doing. But let's take an example. So when we talk about the 2Gen continuum, we have here child on one side, adult to the other side, and the whole family in the middle. One example program that we can look at would be the Minnesota Family Investment Program, which we lovingly call MFIP. So even though MFIP has family in the name, it's very much a parent-focused program. There is a child associated with that adult, But really the point of intervention is nearly entirely with the parent. And MFIT doesn't track data about the child beyond the age and gender of that child at the time of entry. And then they back calculate any time from there how old the child is. But that's the extent of data that we know about the child in that family. And when we think about, so that's where it would be along the continuum. When we think about what the entry point here would be, that's one way that we think about it with the entry point here, we can see that that main tier that they work on is economic access, so cash assistance. MFIP also works to establish a job and career and potentially education and training for the adults. But really, not being attentive to the aspect of social capital and health and well-being of a parent, or taking into account any element of the child, really weakens that intervention. So when we see MFIP, we see that there's an opportunity to expand where the different gears are that are taken into account. So now I'm not saying, as I said before, that all of the gears need to be provided by a single agency or service organization, but the gears benefit from being factored in and connected through either collaboration, which is another point that's highlighted in the Homework Starts at Home info session on PowerPoint, and the reality of the interconnectedness should be baked into the model between both the family members and the different gears. So let's think about how we might bring this 2-gen lens to the work. And I want to just flag, you can take a look at the theory of change and logic model in your handout to kind of walk you through these different points from the left side of the page to the right in the shared outcomes section of the handout. So this is a parent here, and this is how we would define our target population, really thinking through being an MFIP employment service provider. So before thinking about 2-gen, we would see that any individual seeking employment would be the target population. And right there you have a separation. As I mentioned before, do you even ask if that person is a parent? For just a regular service provider, you may not. And does their work take into account that you may have a child in the picture? So your target population, your needs and goals, inputs and activities, outputs, and short and medium outcomes. These are all opportunities to ask yourself, okay, if we were looking at just the adult before, how might we bring in the child in the work that we're doing? So pre-2-gen, you have an individual seeking employment. With the 2-gen lens, you would ask them, are you a parent? Is this something that we should think about when we're talking about your next step, needs and goals? Pre-2-gen, the needs and goals that you have, that you're working with your participant with might be a job or employment plan goals. And with the 2-gen lens, it might be a job with family plan goals that takes into account where might your children be while you're at work, or provides an opportunity to help you find a connection to high quality preschool programs. What are the other sort of goals that you have for your entire family, not just your simple job goals? This is really an opportunity to look more broadly at connecting to other mainstream services. Another info session that will be had in a week from today, if you want to tune in there, and how to connect families to their goals beyond, that include both the child and parent. Similarly, for each one of these steps along your logic model, you can see that there's an opportunity to ask the question, what are we doing for the parent, and how are we planning for the child? The different elements as we think through a logic model, or really as we think through policies that we are putting through, are the things that we're doing for parents and children complementary, aligned, and mutually reinforcing. I think those are really helpful. It's a helpful frame to ask when we think through the different flows for using 2-gen approaches. So some food for thought as you plan. And I'm just going to read these here. So where is our work currently on the continuum? Who might some partners be who can help us expand our thinking to the other side of the continuum, and about what would it take to have a more whole family approach? What logistics considerations arise when thinking about a whole family approach? scheduling, facilities, all sorts of things there. What's our main or entry point here? And what other gears might we think about focusing on? How can we factor in those gears to our work through collaboration, program expansion, or some other method? And how might we be attentive to the gears differently for parents and for children? Are the pieces of our work along our theory of change complementary, aligned, and mutually reinforcing for parents and children? And as you're planning your homework starts with homework or thinking through it, I think this is fruitful to do for your own organization and again with the partners that you want to bring in. So another thing we'll talk about today is 2-gen and housing. Now you might be saying housing for families is 2-gen. It's a parent and a child approach. And I think especially if we think through a simplified concept of 2-gen, where we're looking, does it affect the parent, does it affect the child? That's true, it really does serve both the parent and child. Housing that's really stable for a family can provide that critical foundation for getting the other gears stable or thriving. But it isn't enough in and of itself. Providing housing without attention to the other gears really falls short of recognizing that interrelatedness of the family. So the key question is, how do we use housing as that entry point for the family to connect to additional supports and development of those gears, and think about social and human capital as the connector and sustainability for the work. So even in the Heading Home Minnesota's 2020 plan, one of the 7 core efforts is to help people find employment and income in childcare. That's one example of how it can be the platform for a well-rounded approach to that interconnected reality of family lives. One example that I'm going to share is about the Housing Opportunity and Services Together demonstration. And this is just one example of housing in 2-gen. But I'll say the pictures that I have in this PowerPoint are from an organization called Our House in Arkansas. And they have really great pictures, so I use them and put photo credits in. But they also have a 2-gen approach that includes housing. So that's another organization that you can look at. I'm going to talk about HOST, which I'm not affiliated with directly, but have participated in information sessions about the work, and just thought it presented a good example and something, how one way to think through all of this. So HOST was built from the lessons of Moving to Opportunity and Hope 6 out of Chicago. And really what the MTO and Hope 6 researchers found was that improving housing and access to safer neighborhoods is simply not enough to really change the life trajectories for most public housing residents. This is specifically public housing. For one, they found that it doesn't take into account the deep effects of racial segregation. And for another, their findings were that housing alone cannot address the complex problems that many families in public housing face. So the HOST demonstration was a multi-site, and still going as far as I understand, multi-site study that tested whether intensive 2-gen wraparound case management services for low-income families, adults and their children, can improve family well-being, stability, and the overall vitality and health of distressed communities. And I know they're still doing research on it. So they had sites in Chicago, DC, New York, and then they had 2 sites in Portland. The key components of the work that they did was that they had intensive case management with parents and children. So it was a 1-to-30 caseworker and family ratio that worked with both parents and kids. The goals were to address obstacles to self-sufficiency. So that included poor mental health, physical health, low literacy rates, educational attainment, weak connections to the labor force, and then they built in strategies to foster that sense of community among families and building collective efficacy. So that was something that the researchers highlighted as really critical, that trust piece. For example, they couldn't, the folks who were working with families needed to build that sense of trust in order for parents to want to send their children to the activities that they had for kids. However, they also wanted to build that trust among families, and that was a key part of the demonstration project. So it was targeting the most vulnerable families in public housing, but they and they really tried to build that collective efficacy among the group in order to have that glue for the other interventions around mental health, literacy, educational attainment, and weak connections to the labor force. Each site service model is actually pretty different depending on the needs and strengths of the site. So some of the sites have all of the services provided from one single organization, while other sites have a backbone organization that brings in partners and works collaboratively. All of them have those connections to that mainstream services, social capital, and two generations. So this presents several examples that you can kind of dive into as you're interested going forward. So some food for thought as you plan. How might we build trust with and between participating families that we work with? How might we be explicit in our planning for both parent and child in our practice model and how we define our outcomes? And what are ways that we can use the authorities and flexibilities that we have within our power, especially thinking through the collaborative nature of the partnership to allow for that more family-centered design and connecting support for the years. So the last thing we'll talk about is Minnesota's 2Gen Policy Network. So what is the Minnesota 2Gen Policy Network? Well, it's an interagency cross-sector initiative that's aimed at systems change so that families are at the center of the policies, programs, and practices in our state. We have partners who are state agencies or local sites, their partners, county counterparts, and also partners at the University of Minnesota. The whole premise of the 2Gen Policy Network is that there are systemic barriers to serving families in a holistic 2Gen way. And I love that little curved face, like, no duh. Yes, there are. But I think it's really an important thing to say out loud. So we started saying that out loud and worked with partners to ask them and really present the question, how can state, county, and community partners come together authentically to address systemic barriers and challenges to supporting families in a more holistic way? What we worked with sites to do in the last year and a half is had in-depth engagement with these 4 local sites and their partners, and worked to co-create and test, and we're in the middle of the implementation phase right now, 2Gen innovative approaches with this goal of identifying policy and practice changes that can inform statewide systems change. So we worked to define and scope the challenges, diagnose and locate these issues, and then co-create an approach to address the issue with key partners. We are working to learn from it and continue to move forward in our implementation of this 2Gen approach. So our partners are the White Earth Nation, Northside Achievement Zone, St. Paul Promise Neighborhood, and Olmsted County. Those are the sites themselves, and then their county counterparts, Hennepin County, Emerge, Hired. In St. Paul Promise Neighborhood, it's Ramsey County and Midpad. And then within White Earth and Olmsted County, they have very strong partnerships within those entities. So as we've done this work with families and sites, we've heard from the sites we're working with and our partners about these 7 principles that are critical to doing the work of 2Gen. And these are also included on your worksheet with a more descriptive principles. The ones on the screen right now are sort of the abridged version. So I'll point out, what I want to point out here is that these principles that we have are really baked into the Homework Starts with Home preliminary practice model pieces. When we talk about family voice and culturally responsive and customized services, we see the nothing about us without us from the RFP. Our conversation, or our, principle here, connected systems, really is, I think, is shown in the nature of the application and funding stream as an attempt to do that linking and alignment. So the innovation and evidence principle is very much connected and seen through the grand challenge. Collaboration, again, that's really the whole structure of the grant requirements, is that collaboration is a requirement for this Homework Starts with Home. and the equity as a frame for the entire practice model. So it's really exciting, I think, to see those that alignment between these two efforts. Some common themes across the sites that I'll just pull out here, and they're really themes of the work that's happening at each of the sites. So integrated service delivery, shifting from compliance to a more generative relationship with families, family-driven plans, and tools to support the work. And what I mean by that is having the resources and sort of structures in place so that this type of 2-gen full family work can have the infrastructure it needs to live on and to be sustainable. So in one of our first sites in Olmsted County, there's a lot of work happening in Olmsted County that's 2-gen. The specific work that I'll highlight today is working with mostly non-custodial fathers on both intensive employment training as well as parenting skills. And this is really designed to strengthen employment outcomes for the father and strengthen the relationship between parent and child. So what I want to highlight here, and you'll see this in the next 3 slides, is how we think about that entry point here as well as the continuum. And this is just to kind of have examples so we can collectively flex our muscle on how we think about, or I should say strengthen our muscle for how we think about the gears in the continuum. So Olmsted County is also working on tools to support the work they want to do and looking at this, an intake form used that typically would be just for the parent, but they're combining it in a way that supports that entire and holistic approach to families. So the learning opportunity for the state here is really how to better engage fathers and for integrated services with a family plan. So when we think about that work with Olmsted for their Fathers Project, the entry point may be job and career pathways, but they are working to build in the social capital element with the relationship with the child, health and well-being, and ultimately their hope is to have an increase in child support payments for the child. So that's kind of the tangible out of it. Intangible might be that relationship between the father and child. This is modeled after work that's being done in Colorado. In the White Earth Nation, White Earth has an integrated data system called WeCare. So all of those gears within their system are represented. They ask questions about each of these domains. They also have coordinated case management where those gears are maybe need some additional attention to make sure that they are working together. But what really differentiates the work that they're doing, or one of the things, is that they're intentionally building out and enhancing the cultural responsive element to their WeCare work and doing it, the outreach specifically with educational communities within the White Earth Nation to increase the representation for their WeCare system. So that's really the social capital piece. And again, their integrated system allows for connection with the whole family. In the Northside Achievement Zone, there are a number of different things going on, but one thing I'll share is a presumptive eligibility for child care assistance. So this sits squarely within economic assets as well as really education for young children, really for children in any age. So for presumptive eligibility, what that ends up meaning is somebody who has a job offer but may not have child care yet because of payment processing or other paperwork that needs to be done. If they're in this pilot with Northside Achievement Zone and Hennepin County Hired and Emerge, they essentially will, while that paperwork is being processed, they will say, we will presume that you're going to be eligible and we'll pay for that period of time while we do the processing. That hasn't always been the case. That helps the parent be able to go to work right away. It also helps that child have a continuity of care, which is really important, especially on the early childhood side of things. NAS, Hennepin, and Hired and Emerge also recognize that the burden that families have when they have a number of providers that they work with and have to talk to, get to talk to maybe, repeatedly about the same story and the same challenges that they're having. So in order to take the onus of that burden more off the family, NAS kind of been hired and emerged, created a cohort of providers who are learning together and working to reduce that compliance burden across the three groups that any one family might have to work with. So again, you can see the entry point here with the simple economic assets, but there's really a much more interrelated approach to the work that they're doing. Similarly, with St. Paul Promise Neighborhood, in partnership with Ramsey County and MidCAD, they're offering explicitly parent-directed career training where parents are able to talk more about their hopes and dreams for what they want rather than being put into a box about what education or training program somebody else thinks they should be doing. And at that same time, going through a parent power curriculum and having their children at in a literacy program at that same time. So within these programs, families are building out self-determination plans. Again, that's that theme of that family design plan, which will serve as a less compliant and obligation-driven family plan for input. So you might notice that there are themes across these four, and I'm hoping that it will help you think through how can we look at both the child and the parent, think about it as a whole family, and think through these gears. So some resources for you as you plan your work. The Ascend at the Aspen Institute has a wonderful resource bank. They have an outcomes bank, which can help you think through some of the outcomes that you might collect. The Host Initiative, the initiative of the Urban Institute. So see, they have good videos and lots of excellent resources there. The Center for Law and Social Policy and the National Governors Association are all wonderful places to find out more about 2Gen, about the national efforts that are happening, and really just kind of ground the planning and practice that you'll all be doing. Great. Any questions?
So actually, if you want to go one more slide, Jane.
Yep.
And then if you press the button.
Okay. Just a moment, we're doing some technology pieces. Okay. So will you be distributing slides and materials to the participants after the webinar concludes?
Yes, there will be a copy of the slides made available on the Homework Starts with Home webpage. We'll provide that webpage on the next slide so you can see that as well. And in addition, the handout that Jane referenced today, if you're joining us remotely, that's available at a web address that I can read out to you here again. It's tinyurl.com/hswh-2-gen. So Homework Starts with Home -2-gen, G-E-N, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And so that handout has also all the links to the resources, the national resources that Jane just described.
And so that answers the third question, where can I find a copy of the logic model the handouts mentioned, and that will be posted with the slides. Do programs have to be 2Gen?
So in the Homework Starts with Home request for proposal, the elements of the practice model are all described as being the things that we are aspiring to achieve kind of consistently and commonly across the specific implementations of Homework Starts with Home, with a recognition that that very few communities today will have all of those ingredients of the practice model in place. The purpose for doing these sessions, in fact, is to help communities and potential applicants think about and strengthen the way that they might work in some of those elements of the practice model into their proposals. And so our aspiration would be that that as many proposals as possible are including as many ingredients as possible when they apply, but also that we're making progress throughout implementation toward fully realizing that practice model. It's also intentionally described as a preliminary practice model, recognizing that there's going to be things we learn along the way that we can't anticipate today, and that hopefully over time the practice model itself will also get stronger and may end up including some additional ingredients. So I think that covers the questions that we have submitted over menti.com. Again, if you have other questions you'd like to add that way, go to menti.com and enter the code 606809 when prompted. And so why don't we open it up now to folks in the room and folks on the phone or on the webinar, if anybody else wants to chime in with any additional questions for Jane. Just go ahead and unmute yourself and then feel free to pose any questions. Was there a chat question? Okay, let's see. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. We're going to see if we can retrieve the question in the chat function. All right. So, question from Kim: how are you thinking about the fact that there will be a new governor? Thanks for the question, Kim. The short version of the answer to that question is that this program really is intended to operate over a 3-year period of time that begins on October 1st. So we'll certainly span different administrations, but we intend for the program to kind of operate regardless of that change in administration. So I don't anticipate any particular impact there. Let's see. Okay, and then looks like some of the other questions we might have already answered. Great. Any other questions? Either folks want to chime in orally or add to menti.com? Well, we hope this information has been helpful to you in thinking about how to apply a 2-gen approach in the context of your work with Homework Starts with Home and frankly with your work more generally. I will now advance to the next slide, which I think, if I can, let's see. There we go. This page provides you with some additional information about Homework Starts with Home, so where you can find the slides when they're posted at that first link, and then in addition, just where the additional information about Homework Starts with Home will be available. Please remember that there are these weekly series of in-person and webinar information sessions that are focused on different elements of the practice model. Next week's is focused on the use of mainstream systems in the context of Homework Starts with Home. That'll be followed by a session, an extended session focused on progressive engagement and rapid rehousing, and then a session on trauma-informed care in schools. And finally, we'll conclude with a presentation about the Hamilton Family Services San Francisco Unified School District pilot initiative, with the participants in that pilot sharing some of their experience focusing on student homelessness in San Francisco. And so really encourage you to find out more about each of those sessions and sign up to attend at the third link listed on this slide. Finally, if you have any other questions about Homework Starts with Home or would like to get information that you haven't received from those other sources, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact us. The point of contact for the initiative is Diane Elias, and her contact information is on the slide, 651-284-3176. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and good luck with the next steps on your proposals.